Action.
Hi, my name's Ben. I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic, and this is my story. I grew up in South Florida, and I will say that I grew up in a wonderful family. My mom and dad, very loving, provided me with a ton of opportunities in my childhood. I would say my family was, for the most part, what any child would hope for and pray for. I'm very lucky in that aspect. Through my childhood, I grew up enjoying a lot of things. A lot of sports. I played football, soccer. Grew up, I did a lot of surfing. That was probably my number one passion. Got introduction to playing guitar. There was a lot of things that I loved to do and found a lot of freedom in. And basically, my first experience ever taking a substance, I had access to some codeine that was from Canada, that was in my uncle's gym bag in a vehicle. I went with my cousin and my family down to see the Miami Dolphins football game. My cousin, who was a few years older than me, pulled these out of my uncle's bag when they weren't looking and said, "Hey Ben, let's try taking some of these." And I enjoyed the feeling very much. It's something, honestly, I'll never forget. And coming up, I had a traumatic experience in my life at 10 years old, and ended up summer prior to 6th grade, I was in a situation where I was molested by a mid 40-year-old man for several months over the course of a summer. And at that point in time, I was never quite the same after that. And going into middle school, that completely changed me. And I touched on my initial experience with substances, but also at the age of 10, right around that time, I had my first experience with alcohol at a New Year's party, and I had my first drunk. And for the first time ever in my life, I felt absolute freedom, comfort, and the saying goes, I had arrived, and I thought to myself, this is why adults do this. And it got me outside of myself, and more importantly than anything, I would say I felt this urge of confidence. But I will tell you this, I went into middle school absolutely petrified, from my experience of being molested and just the low self-esteem that came with that. And it was as if I was walking around knowing that nobody knew, but at the same time, everybody absolutely knew. And I never felt I was good enough. And I just had this internal fight with myself. I just had this lack of self-esteem and honestly what later turned into this eternal hate for myself. And that started at a young age. I went into high school, and for me, that's where alcohol and drugs became more readily available. To be perfectly honest, the school that I was in, it was very readily available. And I will say that because of my insecurities, because of my fear, because of what I had been through, looking back, I had this sense that I always had to try to prove myself, and I was never good enough. Always trying to live up to what I thought everybody else was doing, what everybody else expected, including my peers. And getting into high school, I had my first experience with smoking pot, the little bit of alcohol that comes with that. And, for me, I started immediately to find a sense of belonging amongst the people I was hanging out with. And by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I had done quite a few different families of drugs, if not all of them at that point. And I can honestly sit back and tell you by 16, I absolutely had a problem with alcohol, pot, benzos, taking pain pills, opiates. and just really whatever I could get my hands on. A big part of growing up in South Florida at that age too, at 16, when everybody starts getting their driver's licenses, I started going down to all the raves in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, and spending the whole night out and taking a lot of ecstasy, and again, just pushing the envelope because I thought that's what everybody else expected. You know, I don't know if you could say that I found my identity in that, but it was straight fear. And I'll say this, I hear a lot of people say that high school was the best years of their life, and I can very easily say that it was the absolute worst experience of my life. And you know, it turned into me throughout high school being suicidal. You know, there were days where my mother, being the loving, caring mother that she was, who was completely lost at that point in my life, would literally see how devastated I was some mornings and just say, Ben, I'm not taking you to school today. I'll just take you down to the beach. You can surf today. Because I was that mentally impaired, and I didn't know how to get through a day without substances. My mother brought me over to an adolescent treatment program in West Palm Beach and sat me down with the therapist there. And I looked at this therapist and said, I want to die. I'm too scared to kill myself. Why would I allow you all to take the substances from me, the one thing that I have that gives me comfort once in a while? So I got home to my roommate at the time, who was doctor shopping for Oxycontin back in the day, and he said, here, Ben, here's a couple Oxys. Enjoy yourself tonight. And from that point on, my opiate addiction took off. IV drug use, etc. I can't even put into words how devastating so many of the experiences that I had, both self-imposed and the situations I found myself in where I just crossed so many lines morally for myself, philosophically for myself. I ended up in a situation where I was in a psych ward. Once again, you know, I had a couple overdoses already down here in South Florida, and my option was to get on a plane to go to Minnesota, and that's the only way that they were letting me out of this psych ward. So I go up to Minnesota, and again, let me make this very clear, with this innate desire to be sober. I wanted it more than anything in the world. Like, my God, why can't this just stop? And somehow was afforded the opportunity to attend treatment, which was unexpected. But for me, that wasn't the end. You know, no matter how badly I wanted it, I got straight A's in treatment, let me tell you. But I was the first guy to get high. I quickly found myself in the same situation in Minnesota that I was in Florida. And I met my now fiance, Whitney, up in Minnesota. And, you know, she had a bit of an opiate problem as well. And we made a great couple, brought us together, and she ended up getting pregnant. And what a relief that was. In my active addiction, I said to myself, thank God I'm having a kid. I finally have every reason in the world to stay sober. And boy, did I fail at that one. And she did too. We did hand in hand. By the grace of God, my son Weston was born healthy. But he was born, and that should have been it, right? And I had every intention of having the family, the baby, growing up, white picket fence, the dog. It didn't take either one of us but 24 hours after getting back from the hospital. Not even 24 hours. It was probably the second we walked in the door. And we were back to doing what we were doing, only we had a newborn. A couple months later, police department walked my son out the front door while Whitney was at work, working her shift. And first thing I did, you know, run to get my fix. I didn't know what else to do, you know, and I just couldn't escape my addiction. We both lost custody of our son for a while. And And December 8th, 2010 was a big deal. Whitney and I jumped in a U-Haul, hauled butt down to Florida within a couple weeks. And I put down everything prior to Whitney, and I got Weston back in my life, and I drove Whitney to pick up some drugs a couple times because she couldn't stop. And somehow I was staying stopped at the time, thanks to the previous treatments and all the effort that I put in previously. I guess some seeds were planted. I went through some nasty withdrawals, but I couldn't go on anymore. I had completely failed as a father, and through living a life of sobriety and recovery and gradually putting things together, I'll say this, the first 2 years of me being sober were no cakewalk. I was really cleaning up the wreckage of my past, as they would say. And we just gradually got better. We learned how to separately co-parent. And several months later, somehow we ended up back together. And that was in 2015, October 2015. But just through the miracles of recovery, I tell people all the time, now the moral of the story isn't go get back together with your ex. But the point is like, if you allow the miracles to happen, for me, if I don't screw things up, miracles tend to happen. And I just let that process go. And today, like, we live together. We both have custody of our son. In fact, I just celebrated 10 years of sobriety 2 days ago. And it's so amazing where recovery can take you. This is not the end of the story, what I'm about to tell you, but due to my sobriety, I ended up going to school for addictions and got in the recovery field. Everything I went through, everything Whitney went through, miracles happen. And in this process, if I had to sum it up, I could never imagine being clean and sober. I still don't understand it today. What I do know, though, is the action that I took. I started listening to other people and doing things that didn't make sense to me but made sense to them. I went in totally different directions. I just did what other people told me to do, people that I knew and had confidence that they knew what they were talking about. And I'd like to sit here and tell you I had faith in these people, but the fact of the matter is I just think I didn't know what else to do. I'm a firm believer in people. Drug addicts, alcoholics, people suffering with whatever it may be, that we have an ability to get better. We have an ability to excel. So I just like to tell people, don't give up on yourself. The only thing I did right for a really long time is I just didn't die. And I kept trying. And I always say the same thing at the end, anytime I'm asked to speak or do a group nowadays. I'll leave it with this. If no one told you they love you today, I do. Thanks for letting me share my story.